living in God's love. And I would like to start by reading these few lines from the Bhagavad Gita. It is from chapter 6, where Krishna says, and Krishna represents God here, and he is telling this to Arjun, who represents the devotee like each one of us here. And the Lord says, "He who beholds me everywhere, and who beholds everything in me, never loses sight of me, nor do I lose sight of him." I repeat it again. He who beholds me everywhere, and who beholds everything in me, never loses sight of me, nor do I lose sight of him. And this truth that Krishna is saying here is demonstrated in the lives of the saints. And whichever true saint whose life we would have read, we would have seen this, that it is true again and again. And these saints who have renunciated, left everything, and they are only and only living for God alone, with all his love directed towards him and with complete faith in him. And we also see in the lives of Paramhansa Yogananda and Swami Kriyananda, those of us who have read their autobiographies, again and again we've seen that whatever they have needed, whenever they have needed, God has somehow, it has come to them, God has brought it to them, because God never loses sight of his devotee who is in tune with him and who is completely in love with him. And we see in Swami Kriyananda's life so many times, one of the times he had collected some money to go to India, and suddenly then he had to use that money for something else. And there goes the money, and there goes his trip. And then he says, he just prays to Divine Mother, and he says that now if you still want me to go, you will have to fund this trip. You will have to, kind of fund this trip, the whole thing. And as he prayed this, and in a couple of days, somebody comes to him. And this person he knew him, but he was not in touch with him since a long time. And this person just comes and gives him a check. And he hands it over to him. And he says, "The Divine Mother told me to give you this." And he says, "You can use it in any way you want." And here we see how Divine Mother, how God is watching over these saints who have completely given their lives to him. And again, in Paramhansa Yoganandaji's life also, so many times we've seen that one of the incidents is, just now we also had a play by Gurgaon, The Two Penniless Boys. And his older brother, Paramhansa Yogananda's older brother, Ananta, he is who believes that, earning money is the only thing you need to do. And he was just wasting his time meditating. And he is challenging Yoganandaji's faith. And he says that, I will send you to Vrindavan and with his friend there. And he says that he puts conditions that there, I'm not going to give you any money. But then you are not going to beg for money, you're not going to ask for food, and you're not even going to miss any meals. And he didn't even give him a return ticket, and he says you have to come back on your own and reach here before midnight. And Yoganandaji, completely fearless, no doubt, because people who have so strong faith and love for God have no fear, have no doubt. And he accepts the challenge, and he and his friend, they go to Vrindavan. And as you all must be knowing, as the time approaches for lunch, there are these two men who come, take them to this ashram, and they are they're given wholesome lunch there. A person comes and then also takes them around. And when it's time to go back home, they are given return tickets to go back home. And once he came back, his brother was completely surprised that how did that happen? And then as he had promised, he then became the disciple of Paramhansa Yogananda, and he gave him Kriya. And I was, recently also reading about one more saint whose name is Swami Gyanananda Giri. And he's a Swiss person from Switzerland. And he comes to India. He receives Kriya here. He reads the autobiography there in Switzerland. Somebody gifted him the book. And then he comes here in India. He receives Kriya from one of Yogananda ji's friend. And then he soon becomes a Swami. And he renunciates everything. He's a sadhu in orange robe. And all he carries is a stick, his kamandal. And he had little bit of a savings initially, which also got over. And he was a wandering sadhu. He sometimes lived in Rishikesh, in Haridwar, on the mountains, or in Vrindavan. He was just wandering. He didn't know, he had no shelter on his head. He didn't know his next meal would come or not come. He was completely living in God's love and living in God's faith completely. And one time he decides to go to Gangotri. And it is approaching winters. And usually that time, nobody, goes much in that high altitude. But he decides he wanted to go, and he starts. And everywhere he goes, he just walks down. He's always walking around places. So he started walking. And he reaches a little bit of an altitude. And where there is no possibility that anyone would be there. And evening is approaching, and then he decides that, okay, I'm going to rest here and now wake up tomorrow morning and then again proceed further. And before sleeping, for a moment he just thinks that, oh, I'm a little bit hungry, if I could get some food. And he looks around, but there is nothing, no food around. But he's contented, and he makes his place, and he's almost going to retire and go to sleep. And then he listens to these voices coming from nowhere. And in that high altitude, at that time and at that season, there was no possibility that somebody would be there. And this is not one person's voice, this is a group of voices that he hears. And gradually, those voices are approaching him and coming closer to him. And there is this group of people who are trekking towards Gangotri. And the whole group comes to him, and they meet him. And they are carrying a lot of food. So then they give him a lot of food to eat. And he was also feeling a little bit chilly that time. And they also give him a blanket without him asking for anything. He just had the thought that I'm a little hungry. And here, God provides for him. So when we live our life with that faith, with that much of perfect devotion, that God is watching over us, and He's never going to lose sight on us. If we don't lose sight on Him, then God comes and provides and for everything that we may need. There is one more, a very important thing that Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita here in chapter 10. He says, "To those who are attached only to me and who worship me with love, I impart that discernment of wisdom by which they attain me completely." In chapter 18 also, he says these lines which are quite in relation to this. And he says, "Again, hear now my supreme word, the most secret and sacred of all." Now here's the secret of God. "Because you are dearly beloved to me, I offer it now for your highest benefit." And the secret is, then he says, "Absorb yourself in me, be wholly devoted to me, worship and bow to me alone. So shall you undoubtedly reach me. This I promise you faithfully, for you are dear to me." Beautiful, very deep words, and it's a promise by God that we can attain Him, we can be one with Him, we can be self-realized. But a prerequisite, the secret, is that we have to be completely absorbed in Him, completely living in His love, in His faith, in His devotion. Because what happens is, when we are one-pointedly devoted to God, in love with Him, then all the energy of our heart is going up towards our spiritual eye, the seat of God. One-pointedly, it is not getting leaked anywhere out. And then that aligns us, attunes us, aligns us to God's forces of unity, of attraction. And that brings us whatever we may need for our spiritual growth. That brings us grace. And Swamiji says grace is nothing but the power to rise spiritually. And when we attune ourselves one single pointedly in loving God, in devotion to God, then God here Himself is saying that we become receptive to His wisdom. And when we have that wisdom, we can then attain Him. We can be one with Him. We can be self-realized. So that is the secret that He discloses. And I would like to end with one. It was a quote I read by Swami Kriyananda, and I was really looking for it yesterday, but I couldn't find it. But I remember what he said because it really touched me. And I'll paraphrase it. And he said, "The amount of grace we receive from God is directly proportional to the amount of love we offer to God." The amount of grace we receive from God is directly proportional to the amount of love we offer to God. Oh.
And for this week, we usually share from the Rays of the One Light, which is parallel commentaries from the Bible and the Gita, which Swamiji wrote. And in this week, Christ is talking about in his Sermon on the Mount, which was one of his main sermons. He is saying that you all have heard that you shall not kill another human being, and if you do so, you will be in danger of judgment. But I say unto you that whosoever is angry without a cause with his brother shall also be in danger of judgment. And Christ here is talking about the spirit of the law versus the letter of the law. And it's very easy for us to say, oh, I won't kill anyone, so I guess check, that one is done. But it behooves us to introspect more deeply about what Christ is really saying here. We might not have the urge or desire to harm anyone at that level, but what about being angry with other people? What about judging people without a cause? Yogananda ji said that when we are angry with other people, we mentally kill them, so to speak. And we even often say, oh, I could just kill him for what he did, or I could shoot that man for what he did to me. And those are the deeper teachings of Christ and in the Gita also. And it relates very well to our topic today, because when we judge other people and when we are angry with other people, we lose all our capacity to feel any love from God at all. And more importantly, it's not about following the scripture, but we can all ask ourselves, when we are angry with someone, how do we feel? Do we say, oh, I just felt so good, I just told him everything I wanted to, and now I'm feeling so uplifted? Right? It's never like that. Sooner or later, we always regret if we hurt someone with our words or with our attitudes or our judgment, because we all are expressions of God, and the same life throbs in the heart of the other person. And when we judge other people harshly, we are denying that life, the same life which is also flowing through us. And this was something which I had a question for a long time when I came on the spiritual path, that how can I reduce my tendency to just find fault in other people? And it was never a very strong tendency, but I always would find this person did something wrong, they could have said that better, if only they would behave in this way. And I would never feel good after having these thoughts pass through my head. So I used to pray, tell me how I can change my thought patterns and tell me how I can be more accepting of other people. So last week we all went to Babaji's cave for a pilgrimage. And before the day we went to the cave, we had a retreat day at the resort. And there we did a little exercise, which we do always, is we take quotes from Mahavatar Babaji from the Autobiography of a Yogi, and we distribute several quotes to everyone. And the idea is that everyone takes that quote which they receive as a special message from Babaji to tune into that quote and work on that quality. And because nothing in life is coincidence, it might seem so, but because nothing is really a coincidence, the quote that we receive, that everyone receives, is somehow deeply meaningful to each and every person. So keeping that in mind, here's the quote that I received. Babaji says to Sri Yukteswar in this case, he's saying, "Child, for the faults of the many, judge not the whole. Everything on earth is of mixed character, like a mingling of sand and sugar. Be like the wise ant, which seizes only the sugar, but leaves the sand untouched." And I was completely amazed, because one of the things that I have specifically prayed to Babaji is this tendency, is this carping spirit, as Krishna would call it in the Gita. And this quote, therefore, was very meaningful for me. And Babaji simply is giving us the solution that look at the sugar. Just take the sugar, leave the sand. This world is never going to be perfect. Yogananda ji would say about his own organization, and he would sometimes chastise his students who would criticize other people. And he said, if I wanted to find fault in this organization, I can start now and never stop. But why look at the gutter when there is so much beauty all around, right? And so that is the attitude as devotees that we have to adopt, not only because it makes us feel good, but because when we are generous and charitable toward other people, then we realize how much God really loves us. As I introspected more and more on this tendency and for this talk today, I realized that our tendency to judge other people often comes from a tendency to judge ourselves. And we judge ourselves because we think, I have to be a certain way or God will not love me. I have to do this, and then perhaps God will love me, right? But the moment we drop that false idea and we really realize the truth that the masters have been telling us, that God loves you unconditionally, then we can start to have that same attitude also toward other people. And it all starts by feeling God's love in our meditation and then sharing that with other people. Swami Kriyananda was once meditating in a chapel in Assisi associated with the life of Saint Francis, and he had a very beautiful and intense experience of sweetness in that chapel. And he prayed to Saint Francis, asking, how can there be so much sweetness? And he received the answer in meditation from Saint Francis, and Saint Francis told him, by not judging anyone, by accepting them as they are, and by seeing everyone as your brother and your sister. And the moment we start to make that a reality in our lives, the more you will find that you feel the love of God, that you, not only because someone else has said that, but you feel that God really loves you. And whenever we have unkind or negative thoughts, as Sachi was also hinting, we cut ourselves from that flow of grace, from that flow of love. Towards the end of our pilgrimage, we had another little adventure as we were all coming at the train station, arriving in Delhi, and everyone was sort of getting into a cab. And suddenly I see one of my friends chasing this other person, and my friend fell on the road, and this person is running as if he has stolen something. So without thinking for even a split second, I just ran after him. My backpack is on my bag, and I'm running, and it felt like eternity, but it must have been like 2 minutes of running because I wasn't expecting. And finally, after a long time, I caught up with him outside the train station, and I find that he actually was not successful in stealing anything. So I was sort of laughing, with, telling God, here you have me running like Tom Cruise in Mission Impossible, and this thief hasn't even stolen anything. So I came back, and we all prayed that, okay, everyone is safe, nothing got stolen, so we are on our way back. But all the joy and happiness that I was feeling coming from the pilgrimage was suddenly gone. And I was wondering, what happened just now? Is it just because my breath is too fast? So I said, okay, let's do a little even count breathing. And nothing was working, and there was a strange restlessness in my heart. And at that time, I realized that I had this sense of hatred, this sense of anger with that person. indignation. How could he do that? And he's such a bad person. He hurt my friend, and everything was in chaos. And all these negative attitudes suddenly cut me from the flow of grace, from the flow of love that all of us had experienced over the last 4 days. So as soon as I realized that, I prayed to Master and I said, he must have a reason to do whatever he does. Just bless him, fill him with your light, and may he find whatever that he is looking for, and above all, find true happiness in the highest way. And after a minute or so of praying this way, I found that my heart was calm again, and I started, feeling that upliftment of my heart which I was experiencing over the pilgrimage. And that was a very powerful experience for me. Seems very mundane, but I think overall, because of all these experiences, this trip was a huge success personally for me, for learning all these lessons from God, from our great masters. And Yogananda ji wrote about this tendency also, which I wanted to share a quote from him. He says, "Each human being is a medium through which God's magnetism flows. Do not obstruct that power through unkindness. To grow closer to God, you must be kind and loving to all. Those who fill their hearts with unkindness can never learn to love God. When you experience deep kindness in your heart, you are at peace inwardly and see everything as a part of God. And when you love God, you cannot be unkind." And that was such a beautiful lesson for me, that we think, oh, God does not love me, and maybe once when I feel His love, then I can share it with other people. But it really works the other way around. The more you try to share love with other people, the more you are generous and charitable, you find that in that giving, you are being filled with love, because there is no other love except God's love. That is what Anandamayi Ma said. Today we have her on the altar. And when you are trying your best to love other people and be kind to them, it is only God's love that is flowing through you. And through that experience, you learn bit by bit, by every interaction, that you are living in God's love when you are trying your best to share it with everyone. I'd like to end by reading one of the prayers from Whispers from Eternity. This prayer is called, "Make me the drops of sympathy in all tearful eyes. May my spark commingle with thy great spark. May it twinkle in all eyes. Bless me that I may swim in the sea of souls. Let me rush with thee on avalanches of noble desire. Let me feel thee in the budding hopes of all roseate minds, and in the silence of all saints. Let the tears of my sympathy commingle with the drops in all tearful eyes. Together thou and I will dance on the wavelets of all feelings. We will cheer every heart with divine delight. Let us throb in the life of all beings." Om.